Hi. I find that there are two ways of telling a story. One is what I call the cocktail party version, where it comes in cliff notes, it makes me sound really smart, and it's like, wow, I had us all planned from the start. And then there's the other version, which is the real version, right? Which is a little messy, but that's how real life is. So I generally choose to tell the second story because I find that's the one that serves the most. So this is my story. I was born in 1977. If you're doing quick calculations, I'm 35. So let me just put you out of your misery, right? So I was born in 1977, and I was a very typical middle child. I was full of anxieties. I was full of fears. I was scared of a whole bunch of things. I was scared of speaking in front of a crowd. I was scared of taking a risk. I was scared of losing money. I was scared of standing out. I was scared of you name it. I had all of these fears, and I'm not saying all middle children are like that, but I certainly was. And if you're a person who's full of fears of such things, you generally don't make active choices in your life. Life sort of happens to you. People make the choices and you kind of follow along because you're so scared of things that it feels kind of safe when people make choices for you. And that's who I was. And that's how I ended up at 18 years old in junior college. When I was, the first big decision that you face in junior college is where do you go for university, right? And there were all these university applications that said, what's your dream? What's your passion? Tell me in 200 words. And it was so intimidating because I didn't have anything to write down. I was very clear about I wasn't clear about what I wanted, but I was very clear about what I didn't want. And if anyone asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I couldn't tell any adult because it would sound more like, okay, I don't want to wear boring office clothes. I don't want to sit in a cubicle. I don't want fluorescent lights and horrible court shoes. That was my list at 18, right? And that does not make for a career choice. So at that time, I applied for art school in New York, not because I liked art, but because I thought, okay, I draw, I kind of like words, and it sounds like the least corporate option out there. And of course, my parents are quite typical Singaporean Chinese parents. They thought that was an incredibly bad idea. And they convinced me to choose a university course in architecture in Singapore. And so I went along with it. Again, not because I cared very much about architecture. At that point, what I thought about a house or how I drew houses was still your typical triangle and a square with the one that we all draw, the generic house, right? And I went into architecture because it was convenient. And I thought I would just learn to like it. Right, which is a pretty typical Singaporean story for many young people. And by all accounts, I think if nothing intervened, I would have just gone along with this and become a pretty substandard, mediocre, trying to be happy kind of architect and producing very boring buildings, right? So you should be thankful that I'm not out there, right, creating more ugly buildings. But what happened was that in 1997, due to a series of very strange events, I was forced to make the first big choice of my life, right? I was forced to ask myself, do I believe that there is a God? And if I do, what does that mean for my story? If there is a bigger story out there than my life story, and if life was bigger than my own fears and my own anxieties and my own neuroses, right? And life was about doing things for other people. Life was more than just about money. It was about meaning. And if I say yes to all of those beliefs, then what would my life look like? And so when I was in my second year in university, I chose to say yes to all of those questions. And of course, while I'm thinking about all of these metaphysical, big questions kind of thing, right, it still doesn't change the fact that I'm still in university, stuck in a course that I don't really enjoy. So honestly, my first big question to God, right, was, do you want me to be an architect? because you're God, I'm not. If you choose for me to be architect, I will suck it up just for you, right? And it was a real question for me. But it's not like I got like a big banner in the sky like, yes, be an architect, you know, it doesn't work that way. But I got an answer from my dad. He sneakily sent in an application to a prestigious architectural firm in New York. And at that time, I received it as, okay, fine, the universe has made the choice, I'm supposed to be an architect, all right, I'll just learn to love it. And I did. I went on. It was a great firm. It was decent pay for an intern, and I made a lot of good friends, right? And if not for a small conversation, things wouldn't have gone this way. So I was just having lunch with an American colleague, right? And she was just asking me, what's your plans after the internship? You know, are you going to come back to the States or not? And at that time, I gave my stock standard Singaporean answer, which was, okay, I've got my bachelor's, I'm going to finish up this internship, go back to Singapore, finish up my 2 years, get that master's in architecture, find a safe job, and when I'm in there, I'm going to think about what I want to do. And if I gave that answer in this cultural context, I think most people would say, that's a great plan, it's a safe plan, good, right? But because I'm in the land of the crazy people, right, which is America, right? And they were all like, oh, okay, that's really weird, because if you already know that's not what you want to do, then why are you still doing it? And it wasn't even asked in an accusatory tone, it was like, why? And the moment she said that, I was like, you're right. Why does it sound so sensible when you say it? And it wasn't anything bigger than that. It was just a simple conversation. And I thought, it's true. Even if I don't know what I want to do, I sure know what I don't want. And this is not what I want at all. So I told my parents that I'm going to ditch my master's in architecture, and just so that they won't freak out too much, I told them, and I did, I applied for a master's in computer animation in UCLA. Not because I cared about computer animation, again, right? But because I thought, you know, I need an excuse to stay in America. Toy Story just came out, and it looks kind of fun. I think I could do this. You notice the trajectory of my thoughts, right? And yeah, and my parents didn't freak out that much, right? And so I applied. I had a place, but I had 6 months to wait it out. So I went back to Singapore, and it was the year 2000. And I think a lot of you would remember what the year 2000 is like. It was like the Woodstock of our era, right? So there was never a better time to come back to Singapore, to be young, to have no plan, and to be completely open. So here I was at 23, right? No experience. I applied for computer animation, remember this? But all I used computers were checking email and like playing, I don't know, like Pac-Man or something stupid like that, right? I didn't know any design programs. But I had 2 offers come in from 2 friends who joined 2 .coms, and they said, do you want to be the creative director of my .com? And I said, I have no experience, I don't know anything about it. They said, no problem, never mind, they're just throwing money at anyone who's young and just happy to assume the position. And if you work in a .com, you kind of know what I mean. And I thought, that's kind of cool. So I was offered 2 positions, to be a creative director at a web design studio. This sounds like bad news already, right? And a creative director at an online bookstore. And at that time, I thought, okay, here's my choice, right? Go and do a master's in UCLA, or be a creative director in 2 different .coms, one day and one night. And I thought, well, just pick the cooler option, it sounds kind of fun. Like, and UCLA will always be there, and if this .com thing completely bombs, then you can always go to the master's program again. And so I chose to go in there, and there is nothing like real life to be a real master's program. Right? When you promise a client something, you go back and you pretty much learn it on the spot. That was how I was. I'll say, oh yeah, you can build this Flash thing, it was fantastic. Then I'll go back, all right, how do I do this? And then I would kind of figure it out. And it was a wonderful time because at that period, open source was just beginning and all that. So I learned a lot. So in those 2 years, I picked it all up, graphic design, web design, and it was a fantastic master's program. But what I did learn, the best thing I learned at the end of those 2 years is, this is still not what I want to do. I like it, it was fun, it was flexible, but yeah, to the horror of my parents, I said, you know what, this is still not what I want, so I'm going to quit, and I'm going to freelance as a graphic designer and web designer while I figure out what I want to do, right? So while my poor parents are still trying to digest this, like what on earth is she doing, right? I had another chance conversation. And this time, it was with a friend from university who was a rookie teacher, just started teaching. And he said, you know, I see a very, very interesting market gap and a social gap in Singapore. The social gap is something which is so clear, right? Every kid who graduates from the Singapore system, whether you get an A or a B or an F, right, you come out the same way. You only care about yourself. You only care about your own success, your own failure. You don't see the big picture of what education is about. It's all about you. And yet, at the same time, I'm starting to teach this subject called general paper. It is this one subject where you get to stand in front of class and talk to the kids about this is what's right, this is what's wrong, this is what's happening in Iraq, this is what's happening in Cambodia, and they have to listen to you because they have to take this subject to pass, right? And in the market, there was no GP tuition available, or very limited, because everyone thought, if you get to 18 without reading newspapers and don't know much about the world, you're pretty much screwed, right? No one can save you. And so he said, what if we started this experimental tuition program where we just taught kids the way you should teach, and we teach them about what's out there and what's the whole point of education? And I thought, it sounds pretty cool. It sounds cool, it sounds fun, and most important of all, it sounded meaningful, which was something which I was looking for. And of course, going by my trajectory, I was pretty much used to saying yes to things that I didn't understand, right? So I said, yeah, okay, how hard could it be to just learn to be a teacher? So I agreed to that. And we started in the year 2002 with 20 kids in a smelly basement. It was an old Taoist society. And seriously, right, before every class, we had to take down the incense burners and the big posters and all that kind of thing, right? And the kids were walking like, what's that smell? And we were like, no, I just ignore it, right? So we made a lot of mistakes along the way. But what we were doing enough that was right, that by the end of the year, we had 100 kids. And we thought, okay, this is a sign that there are things working out. So why don't we just put in some serious money into it? So there were 5 of us at first, and we took out $8,000, and we started a school of thought with 40K capital, right? And it was, again, really fun, really good, and it was very, very meaningful. But the problem was, all of my friends who started this with me, they were all still public school teachers bonded to the Ministry of Education, which means I'm the only one who can legally hold the bag. Like, I'm the sole owner of this school, right? And I'm the only one without any credentials of being a teacher. And at that time, my parents were getting a bit nervous. They were saying like, you know, this kind of friend-friend agreement you have, right, which is all verbal and won't it be fun, right? There's no contract. It's not like your friends have said, in 5 years' time, we will quit and definitely join you. You have no assurance of that. And so while I'm having that kind of conversation, right, in my ear, all well-meaning and all, I was feeling insecure. Like, you know, what if I'm wrong, you know? And I remember in 2005, I had to make a choice. I had to decide whether to re-sign a lease, which binds me legally to 3 more years of this office location. And at that time, at the beginning of the year, I was seriously thinking, should I still stay on in this? It's fun, but what if no one joins me at the end of it and I'm left holding the bag? Is this what I really want to do? Is this what I want to teach? And I remember looking for a pastor who used to be a teacher, and I asked him, how do you know when you switch? And he said, you're not going to like my answer, but this is it. You know when you know. And I said, yeah, you're right. It's a completely unhelpful answer. Okay, but he was right. He was right, because at the end of that year, I had this fantastic class of kids. They were not the smartest kids, but they were the most hungry to learn. And we had so much fun learning together that by the time the exams had finished, and they came up to me and said, okay, there's no more A-levels. We still want to learn. We had so much fun learning, but our parents will not pay for tuition when there's no more exam. So I said, okay, that's fine. Tell me what you want to learn, and I will teach you for free, right, just for the holidays. And their answer completely floored me. They said, all right, this is what we want to learn. Remember, these are 18-year-olds who are not like the highbrow schools. And they said, we want to know what is good, what is evil, what is suffering, and what can we do to help. And I thought, when I heard that answer, I thought, this is so clear. You don't need to quit business to do good. You don't need to go to an NGO in some foreign land and all that, right? Because I was seriously thinking about joining seminary and doing all that. And I thought this is just a sign that you can do good completely in the corporate sector, in business, it is possible. And based on just that, I decided I'm going to sign on that lease, and whether or not people join me or not, I'm going to figure out how to make this work. And I was glad I signed on because, sure enough, one by one, as my friends' bonds finished, they came on board. And that's how it came into 2007, where things took on a really weird twist. So we've been 5 years running as a school, and we thought, all right, we've got tons of teaching principles and all that, and I think we should sort of consolidate it in some kind of printed form. And because we were teachers, the first thing that our minds went to was, okay, let's do a textbook and a workbook. But when we sat down for our own editorial meetings, we were so incredibly bored by it. And we were like, oh, this sucks, you know? Like, we don't even want to plan it, let alone anyone wants to read it. So it would be so much more fun if this was like some kind of big like Time magazine or Newsweek editorial, and we were like talking like we're on TV kind of thing. And like, we should just do a current affairs periodical. That is so much more fun. And we thought, actually, that's true. Why don't we just do a current affairs periodical then? And we sort of reverse engineered. We knew that Time and Newsweek magazines were sold to schools for GP because GP has no textbook. Right? At the same time, every kid in Singapore doesn't read it. Right? And they don't read it for three very clear reasons. Number one, it comes too frequently. It stacks up in this big red pile of guilt work that they never read. Right? And number two, it's too American-centric. Right? So they don't understand half the things in there. And number three, it's just reportage. There's so many issues all in there that that the kids don't know what to focus on. So we thought, all right, let's just reverse engineer it then. Make a magazine that doesn't come out that frequently, right? It is concentrated on one issue and has a bit of a Singapore focus about it. And if we just did this for a year, if we wrote and designed and self-distributed it, and we all don't take salaries for it, and if we can just sell 800 copies to pay for printing, it's worth doing, right? We knew how conservative the school sector was. They will only give you a chance if you can last for about 1-2 years. So we thought, all right, let's give that a shot. So here we have the school, and then we have the publishing, and it just started, and we had no publishing experience at all. We didn't even know what a distributor was. So in that same year, while looking for classroom spaces, a unit opened up on the ground floor of the office building we were in. We had never seen a ground floor unit open up before. And this is a beautiful glass frontage. 100 people walk by an hour. And we just signed a lease on that saying, okay, let's just book it. And then we thought, it's kind of stupid to put a classroom in such a beautiful unit. It's like, who wants to see like a teacher like talking? It's like the most boring thing to see. We thought, there are only 3 things that make sense to be put in there. You either put a LAN gaming center, right? Or you put a retail shop, or you put a restaurant. Those are the 3 most sensible things to put in there. And we thought, okay, option 1 would just get us like blasted from God, right? And then option 2, a retail shop, we just didn't think it would work in the Singapore context at that point. But the restaurant made sense. And then we had to think, okay, fine, the restaurant conceptually makes sense, but the idea of a tuition school setting up a restaurant, it's kind of weird, right? So why? Why would we do it? And we thought, okay, up to that point, whenever people asked us, what is the school of thought about? And then we'll talk about about broadening perspectives and big picture and all that, and no one would get it. And they'll say, oh, you are a tuition school. And we're like, no, we are something like a tuition school. And we didn't have a better description for that. Bear in mind that in this point, the word social enterprise, the vocabulary hadn't even entered the sphere yet. So so we thought, if we set up a restaurant, it would be such a big game changer that no one would be able to label you as, you're just a tuition center. It would be one kind of weird tuition center, right? So we thought, okay, we've always wanted to broaden the perspectives of youths. But if we do a restaurant, this will be the one way we can reach a wider public. And they won't label you as only for youths. So we thought, okay, we did some quick calculations. A basic cafe in Singapore takes about $80,000 to $100,000 to run, even the smallest of startups. And it's not like we were rolling in cash. So we went around asking people, what do you think of this? Should we open it or not? Universally across the board, everyone said, please don't do it. Restaurants close very, very fast in Singapore. The competition is crazy. You're just a bunch of teachers. You have no experience in teaching. There's that nonsense school, and then the publishing thing you're trying to do, just concentrate on what you already know. And we thought, okay, the advice makes sense, but is it worth doing? Should we just bet big anyway, on 2 fronts? And we thought, okay, why not? Worst come to worst, you just lose a year without salary, and you just lose $100,000. And I know whenever I say this, people say, oh, just lose, you're very rich, is it? And we're like, but honestly, the thing that binds me and my friends together is, it really is just money. At the end of the day, if you're willing to lose money, you can do tons of things. And we thought, all right, it's worth doing, let's give it a shot. And the bet paid off, thank goodness, in ways that we didn't predict. The restaurant gamble worked because people who came in to write food reviews of the restaurant, when they found out the bigger story behind the restaurant, they ended up writing a far bigger story about us. And that was the year where we actually first started to get press attention. But the second thing, how the publishing thing worked out was, it turned out that only 2 schools wanted to give us a chance. 2 schools were only willing to give this rookie magazine a chance, right? And one of them had a head of department who liked the magazine so much, when the local distributor of Newsweek came around to look for her, asking her if she wanted a renewed subscription, she told him, she did us a tremendously big favor by telling him, you know what, I really, really like this magazine, I don't really want to buy Newsweek anymore, and if you are smart, you would go down and hunt them down while they're still young and small and sign an exclusive distributorship with them. And bear in mind, we had no idea what a distributor was, right? So here we are, we're running around our t-shirt and shorts, right, teaching kids, right? And suddenly in walks this man who's really, really well dressed, right? And he's got his whole folder all prepared. And he tells us this story. And he says, okay, so, and when he realizes we have no idea what a distributor is, he said, okay, this is how distributors work. You concentrate on writing and designing the best magazine possible. I'll just sell and market and do all of the other stuff for you. And we said, what's the catch? And he said, okay, you just have to sell me 10,000 copies at 30% off. Deal? We thought, we need to think about this. Well, okay, I'm kidding, we didn't think about it at all. We're like, yeah, sure, let's sign 10,000 copies out of nowhere, sure, right? And so we did. And that was amazing to us because we didn't expect it at all, right? And I remember one of my directors, she turned to me when we were signing and she said, you know who's doing this? It's God, because we suddenly didn't do this, right? And I thought, yeah, that's true, right? And so I remember the guy, after we signed, he told us straight in the face, okay, once I start selling for you, I want you to prepare to take your company GST ready. And we said, what's that mean? And he said, GST ready means, and he's realizing he's dealing with a bunch of noobs, right? GST ready means 1 million over in revenue. And you're like, please. And he said, no, if I sell for you, that's my target. So please take it legally ready towards that point. And so we sort of took him semi-seriously, and we changed our sole proprietorship to private limiteds and all that. And sure enough, when he started selling, he really meant it. And so from 2008 to 2011, it was the year of tremendous growth. In 2007, running the publishing and the restaurant, right? We were running like a really skeleton team of, I don't know, 8, right? And my typical work day at that point was I would wake up at 8 a.m. in the morning. I would barista and serve out breakfast and all that, right? And I'll finish up my shift all the way to 12 o'clock. And then from 12 o'clock all the way till 5, I am writing and designing for the magazine. From 5 to 7, I teach. From 7 to 9, I teach again. And then 9 o'clock, I'm to come down, help wrap up the restaurant. And at that time, we thought it was like charming to bake your own breads and all that kind of thing, right? And it's not that charming when it's 3 a.m. in the morning. And you got to wake up at 8 a.m. And I did that for a whole year, right? And now with all of these tremendous opportunities that we're having, right? We grew so fast, right? Within like 2-3 years, I think, like now we have like 100 staff strong, right? It's a bit crazy. And when you are young and you're inexperienced and you're unprepared and so much growth happens so fast, cracks will happen. And it was those years, even as things were prospering so well on the outside, on the inside, there were so many struggles, right? And there's so many debates. And honestly, at any point during those years, it could all have fallen apart. Except at every point, somehow or other, I don't know why, we consistently ended up saying, fine, we choose to stay together. We choose to be united. We choose to be friends. And it's on all these tiny little choices that companies rise or fall, the small personal choices that we make. And I am always grateful to my friends that we always chose to stay in friendship. Which brings my story up to this point. It is 2012. I am 35, right? And I wish I could climax the story and then, it's a great happy ending, yeah, and then we all clap kind of thing. But I'm still in the middle of my story. Maybe I'll live till 90, right? So many, many things will still happen, and the choices will always keep happening. I'll just give you one, for example, right? We started our restaurant in the Botanic Gardens in December last year, and it's a 300-seater restaurant. And just because you set up a restaurant for 20 in Northbridge Road and 80 in Queen Street doesn't mean you are prepared to set up a 300-seater restaurant. It's another one of those things that we signed up for because we thought, it is horrible. We egg each other on. We go like, want to do or not, want to do or not, scared about scared, let's just do it, it's just money, right? And we signed up for a 300-seater restaurant, right? And it is no joke. A 300-seater restaurant is almost like $200,000 to run a month, right? And I remember we started in December, and by January this year, my accountant sat the three of us directors down and said, you guys have to think about closing within 1 month. And we were like shocked. And she said, look, I've done some calculations. You are not earning money fast enough to pay out. So here's your choices, right? You either choose to close within 1 to 2 months, right, going by how sales are going, and each of you will be liable for $800,000 each in debt. Or you just keep going on, and possibly, if business doesn't pick up, you will owe much more in debt. What do you choose? And we decided, let's just go for it. Yeah, well, you see, my accountant was saying that we didn't really have a chance of surviving till May. I was getting married. I got married this year. And I said, I'm going to hold my wedding in May in this restaurant because I think it's going to survive till then. And if it all falls apart, I'll find another wedding venue. But I don't think it will fall apart. And I'm thankful that it didn't. And the sales picked up to a point where my accountant's not freaking out, and it looks okay. But I tell you all this because how do I know if next year it happens? I have no idea. But it's still worth doing. It's still okay. And in the end, it's just money. And money is not life, right? So, the 3 things I've learned thus far on my journey. The first is I tell my story in this sequence of like choice after choice after choice because I think one misconception we have about creating a great thing is it's all about this one big cosmic choice that we make at this big cosmic moment, but it's not true. To create anything great, whether it is a business or a friendship or a marriage or whatever, right? It's actually a sum, an accumulation of small, trivial looking choices made every day, but made in a very, very big direction. And I think that's how you actually create something great. This was the picture taken at our 10th anniversary celebration. This was our 10th anniversary as the School of Thought. And we took this, just in May also, near my wedding day. And I think it's just relief on our face that we get to blow out the birthday cake, right? But what strikes me is that at any point of the story, a small different shift in choice would have resulted in a very, very different picture. For those of you old enough to remember, there were these books called Choose Your Own Adventure, where they say like, if you pick this, you go to page 20, if you pick this, you go to page 80, and you pick 80, and it's kwah, you're dead, kind of thing. I love those books, and that always comes to mind when I look at this, right? At any point, a small choice could have resulted in a very, very different picture. The second thing that I learned, I will tell it to you in 2 stories before I give you the point. You see, in all of those years that I was writing and designing the magazines, right, I kind of knew what we were doing it for. We were doing it to push out like a bigger picture of the world and to sort of touch kids about things. But as I'm writing and designing it, often I would wonder like, is it really true? Like maybe it's just a fantasy in my head. Maybe like people just read it to pass exams and in the end it's all for nothing, right? But I still did it anyway. And just a few years ago, I was teaching a class in School of Thought, the first class of the year, fresh new kids, right? And at the end of the class, one kid comes up, this 18-year-old girl comes up, and she says, can I tell you a secret, but you don't tell anyone? And I said, okay, if you killed someone, I have to tell. and after a bit of back and forth about whether she could trust me and all that, and I said, all right, we settled that. And she sits down and tells me this really incredible story about brokenness in her family. And it was a very hard story of betrayal and all that kind of things. And she asked me like, okay, I'm really struggling. Should I forgive my parents and all that kind of stuff, right? And at the end of the conversation, I'm asking her, you know, I'm a complete stranger to you. Why do you come up and ask me all of these things? You don't know me at all. And she said, that's not true. I know who you are. Because since 14, I've been reading your magazines. I know your articles. I see the way you write. I know what your values are. You know my history. I don't trust adults. I don't think any of them know what's right and what's wrong. But when I read this, I think I can trust you. And that's why when I came into your class, I knew I could talk to you. The second story I'll share is that just this year, while we were preparing for the exam period, one of my colleagues was like looking over this girl's essays with her. And he was just struck by how well she wrote. Really great sentences, great depth. And he asked her, how is it that you've come to write so well? Because you come from a really humble background. So she comes from a pretty poor family. Her father is what we call a karanguni man locally, which means a door-to-door garbage man. He basically takes all of your secondhand stuff and recycles cans and all that. And he said, so how is it that you've come to write so well? And she said, we had this conversation on WhatsApp, and she sent this picture. And she said, when I was 14 years old, I was with my dad on one of his garbage collection rounds. We were in a very, very big house, and in this big house, the kid must have just finished his exams because he threw out all of these magazines. So I took him all these magazines, and we were too poor to have tuition. All I had was this. So in all those years, I made sure I read it cover to cover, sentence to sentence, analyzed everything, and this was my tuition. And that's how I came to write so well. I share these stories because the small act of creating that we do in our lives, it's not just about creating a better story for us. It matters because it creates far bigger possibilities and far bigger stories for other people. That's what creating is about. It's not about just us. It's about other people. And that actually brings me to my conclusion. You see, on my name card, it says I'm a creative director. Right? And I've always wondered, right? That's the only title I've ever had on a name card, creative director, right from the start. And at some point, as my companies were growing, I had to ask myself, am I a real creative director? The designers under me are far better than me at designing, far better than me at illustrating. And at some point, I'm thinking, why don't I just give this up, let them take the leadership, and I do something else? And I settled it in my heart that actually, maybe the act of creating is not so much whether you can do Photoshop or do Illustrator or do Flash really, really well. Maybe the act of creating really comes down to this. It's about calling something out of nothing. That's the definition of creating. I believe real creatives are the ones who can see something where no one else can see. And you have the ability to call it into existence. So, I have a heart for the creatives of this city that I hope more of us creatives see that our work is about opening up possibilities, helping people to, letting people see beyond our work towards something that is bigger and higher than all these things, right? All these petty things of this world. So I hope that all of us, and I think all of us, whether you have it on your name card or whatever, all of us have this ability to create. And I would urge you to start to create something that is far bigger than just about us. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Shiao, for that. I think there must be so many questions right now, so we're going to open for a brief Q&A. The first question always takes the longest, but after that it rolls in. And then after that everyone approaches Shiao and like, what should my choice be? So,
I don't know.
any questions?
About the magazine,
Yes.
I've never heard about this work. Can you get this work and buy or?
Yeah, the magazines are sold direct to schools, so they're not. I think we've recently experimented with putting it in Kinokuniya. This is the first year that we've done it. But yeah, you would get it through our restaurants or at the School of Thought, or if you have, well, yeah, if you have like friends in secondary schools or junior colleges, they'll be able to buy it, and that's usually the most direct way. There are 3 titles: Broader Perspectives, Present Perfect, and George, and they each cater to like a different age group. Yeah. Yes.
What's next?
What's next? Oh my goodness. I don't know, we just can't stop saying no to things. Oh my goodness, it's terrible. What's next? We're gonna set up a civic museum of contemporary culture. Sounds big, right? And, you know, we always like to like cast all these things, and we're like, okay, let's try and figure out how to do this. But that's what we that's what we have to create actually. And we are thinking of how do you create a museum that is actually interactive, that people can actually get insights into the thoughts and feelings of contemporary Singapore. And of course, the fun part is trying to figure out a way to make money through it, right? Which is a great challenge because museums don't make money. But I think we have a plan. We are probably going to set up another restaurant, right? To the horror of my accountant, right? It's just that we just keep asking for trouble, right? So there's those 2 things on the plate. We want to expand the School of Thought beyond youths. We always joke to the kids that there is no 10-year series for life. You know, there's no tuition for life after school. And they always come back and say, why not? And we think, okay, actually it's interesting. Let's do a School of Thought for adults. So that's also on the cards. And I think that there are some issues that we are interested in the country. But I didn't want to make this like a corporate presentation, but actually it's only in our 10th anniversary where we sat down and said, what is our mission? We have to figure this out. It's our 10th year, we can't joke around anymore. And we settled on our mission is actually to transform Singapore's soft capital, to build up her social and emotional capital. And all of the things that we talk about are actually oriented towards growing that. So we are interested in national issues. So one of the issues we're interested in is the aging issue. So we have been talking to a few agencies about whether we could prototype a new kind of senior activity center. One where people would actually welcome into their block rather than, oh my God, like take it away, right? Could we create a senior activity center that is so sexy that, yeah, then you're like, sexy old people, you know, kind of thing. But could you create a center that is so desirable through programming or through design or through the concept of it and make it work within an ordinary HDB block? And if that could work, could you like multiply that out? So those are the kinds of things we're starting to look towards. So our vision has gotten, it's still the same in DNA, but it's gotten maybe broader and more national or regional in perspective. Yeah. And we're still, we talk a very big game, and we're still a fairly small team for the things that we want to do, but I guess we just believe somehow you can make it happen. Yeah. Yes?
Do you have any plans to do something beyond Singapore?
Sorry?
Do you have any plans to do anything beyond Singapore?
Yeah, we get a few inquiries about that, like whether people are interested in franchising out School of Thought or Food for Thought. I think the ordinary form of franchise we're not interested, but what we're looking at is how is it possible to use our brand, and yet, you know, franchising is always about benefiting the original holder of the brand, but can you use your brand to lend it to other people to sort of bring value into their communities? I guess we are resistant to bringing it to other countries, although we've had a few inquiries, because we succeeded because we are so contextual here. And I think it's far better for someone in Vietnam to create their own version of School of Thought that works for their nation's issues. I don't think we can. I don't think we have that cross-cultural ability. It's best to have partners on the ground. Yeah. So we're always open, but not sure yet. Yeah. Yes.
Which one comes first, hard work or passion?
Sorry?
Which one comes first, hard work or passion?
Oh, neither. They come together. Hard work or passion? Well, both, I guess. You can't really work hard. Okay, I'd say you can't really work hard for a long time if you have no passion. It is possible to work very, very hard without passion, but you probably won't last the race. You'll probably die at some point or get really, really angry. Yeah, so I think you definitely need both to come hand in hand. Yeah, and I guess when you're passionate, there are days, work is work, it's always going to be stressful. Yeah, there are days where you feel, where you just want to go home and play computer games, right? But if you're doing if you're working hard for something that you're passionate in, it's okay. It's worthwhile. Yeah, I was speaking on this topic to a bunch of university students, and I think the answer I gave them was, you know what? Life is just going to have trouble and suffering no matter what you do. Whether you choose something you love or you choose something that you don't love, you are going to have trouble in your life. The thing is, what kind of trouble do you want? Why do you want this trouble? That's far more important. So you might as well choose something that you like and then deal with that kind of trouble instead. But there's no such thing as a trouble-free life. Yeah.
I think we have time for just one more question. Even I have to ask it then. I've come across a lot of people who, I think, and myself included, are passionate about a lot of things. I'm drawn to a lot of different creative projects or initiatives, etc. How do you choose, and how do you choose what to stick with and what to give up? And how do you know you're doing the right thing? Is it doing the right thing? This is a very long question.
Okay, so it's how do you, wait, so there are two questions, right? The first was, how do you choose? Yeah. And the second is, how do you know if it's right?
Yes.
Okay, I'll do the second one first. How do you know when something that you're doing is right? If it fits that big end goal you have in mind, then it's probably right. And usually usually I'll tell people, you know what, it's not news, but all of you are going to die one day. Every single one of you is going to die. I may die tomorrow for all I know, right? And the thing is, if you can just realize that you are going to die, right, then how do you want to die? You know, and I don't mean like, do you want to die by car crash or what, but you know, I mean like, how, or maybe the converse question is, how do you want to live? You know, and we think it's about work, but it's not. It's about a holistic overview of how is it that you want to pass on. You know, I mean, at 18, it was that stupid, like, I don't want to wear high heels and wear ugly clothes and all that kind of thing and sit in fluorescent lights. But in a way, I was right at 18. That it was about a picture of where I wanted my life to go. It wasn't just about work. It's how did I want my life to look like. And I guess if what you are doing brings you closer rather than further from that big picture of where you want to go eventually, then it's probably right for you. Anything that takes you further and further away from that big direction you want to end up in is probably wrong. And sometimes in life, it's not about making a good choice or a bad choice, but making that choice between the good and the best. And I'll always urge you to pick the best possible choice for yourself rather than one which is merely good. The second question, the first question was, how do you choose? And yeah, I have a lot of ideas inside me, and I see a lot of possibilities, and I think every single one of them could be a full-time job in itself, right? And so how do I choose? I wait. That means even if I think it's a great idea and it's a great opportunity, it doesn't matter if I don't have the right conflation of people, opportunity, money, and all of those things. So I keep probably about a whole bunch of ideas on the back burner, and I pull them out whenever the time is right. This is the time. Do it now. And so there are some ideas I've kept back for years, right? The museum idea, for example, we've sort of like talked about it and joked about it for 2 or 3 years, but we feel that the time is now, and we will push it out next year, early next year, by hook or by crook. So yeah, I guess that's the tough part about being able to read the seasons for what they are, read the moments for what they are. There will, I don't know, I think I think we come to a point where we're always pushed to a choice of option A or option B. And I think at that time, things become very, very clear. If it's like not clear, it's like, can do, don't need to do, you know, it's all right, then I think you can afford to wait. But sometimes things just get pushed to a head. You want to do it or not. And then you choose. Yeah.
With that, thank you, Shiao, for inspiring.